Imagine waking up one morning and realizing the rivers that fed your city for centuries are shrinking, the winds are hotter, the fields are turning to dust, and the sky itself feels angry. Now imagine this isn't just happening to your town. It's happening to an entire civilization that once ruled the world. Stay with me, because this story proves that nature doesn't send warnings twice. Follow right now. Long before modern cities, satellites, and climate reports, there was a superpower of the ancient world known as the Akkadian Empire. At its peak, it controlled massive lands across Mesopotamia, connecting trade routes, armies, culture, and language under one system. This wasn't a small tribe surviving in the desert. This was an advanced empire with organized cities, bureaucracy, and power that made neighboring kingdoms nervous. If you think empires only fall because of wars, you're about to be surprised. Like this if you didn't know climate once erased an empire. Their cities were alive with movement. Farmers depended on predictable seasons. Merchants moved grain and metals. Soldiers guarded borders. Temples stored food. Everything worked because the environment worked with them. Rain came when expected. Rivers flooded when needed. Crops grew. The system felt permanent. And that's always the most dangerous moment, when people start believing something will last forever. Comment, stay ready if you feel this. But then the pattern broke. The rains began to fail. Not once, not twice, over and over. Seasons shifted. Winds turned harsh. The land started drying faster than anyone remembered. Farmers noticed their crops thinning. Wells dropped lower. Animals died. At first, leaders blamed bad luck. Then they blamed the farmers. Then they blamed the gods. No one wanted to admit the system itself was under threat. If this feels familiar, tap follow. As food became scarce, prices rose. When prices rose, people panicked. When people panicked, cities turned on each other. Trade routes weakened because there was nothing left to trade. Soldiers couldn't be fed properly. The empire that once expanded with confidence now had to defend itself against hunger. Power doesn't disappear overnight. It collapses slowly and then all at once. Share this with someone who thinks collapse only happens in movies. People started leaving the cities. Entire families walked away from homes their ancestors had built. Fields were abandoned. Storehouses emptied. The rhythm that once held millions together began to fall apart. Imagine watching your city empty, not because of war, but because the land itself no longer supports life. That hits different. Drop a fire if you're still with me. And then something even darker happened. Internal conflict exploded. When resources shrink, unity breaks. Officials fought over what little food remained. Provinces rebelled. Borders weakened. The empire that once looked unbreakable started to fracture from inside, not because enemies were stronger, but because survival became more important than loyalty. If you're realizing how fragile systems really are, like this now, there's a legend of their capital, the lost city of Akkad, once the heart of power, trade, and culture. No one even knows exactly where it is today. Think about that. A city that ruled millions, erased so completely that we still can't find it. That's not just collapse. That's disappearance. Follow for more ancient truths that hit too close to home. As drought deepened, people migrated in massive waves. Cities emptied. Farmlands turned to dust. The empire's administration failed because you can't manage people who no longer exist in one place. Power without stability is just noise. Armies without food are just men with weapons. Systems without nature's support don't survive. Comment, wake up, if this is changing how you see history. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. The Akkadians didn't vanish because they were stupid. They were advanced for their time. They built roads. They organized trade. They ran cities. They did everything right. Except they couldn't control the climate. No wall, no army, no law could bring the rain back. If the story feels bigger than history, it's because it is. Save this video. What started as dry fields became empty cities. What started as small shortages became total collapse. Generations later, people spoke of the Akkadians like a myth, a warning, a story of what happens when an entire civilization depends on a stable environment that suddenly stops being stable. The real nightmare didn't begin with enemies at the borders. It began in the sky. Follow closely. For centuries, the people of the Akkadian Empire trusted the rhythm of nature the way people trust the sunrise. Rains came, rivers fed the fields, winds cooled the land. The entire system of life, food, trade, and power was built on one invisible promise: that tomorrow would look like yesterday. Like this, if you've ever assumed things will always stay normal. Then the climate changed. Not slowly, not gently. Suddenly, scientists studying ancient soil layers in Mesopotamia found thick deposits of wind-blown dust, proof that fertile land turned dry in a shockingly short time. This wasn't just a bad season. This was a shift that lasted decades. Imagine watching your land turn to sand while your entire civilization depends on farming. That's not stress. That's a death sentence. Follow right now. The rains failed again and again. The rivers dropped lower than anyone remembered. Crops shrank, then failed, then vanished. The land cracked open under the sun. Wells dried. Herds died. Farmers walked for days searching for water that used to be right outside their homes. If you think survival is guaranteed, tap like. People didn't understand climate the way we do. They didn't have models, satellites, or long-term data. All they saw was that the world they trusted had turned against them, so they turned to the gods. Temples filled with desperate prayers. Sacrifices increased. Rituals became more intense. When fear rises, belief becomes louder. Comment: humans don't change, if this feels familiar. But belief didn't bring rain. As drought spread, food shortages hit the cities first. Markets that once overflowed with grain went quiet. Prices rose. People fought over crumbs. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat. Soldiers demanded rations that no longer existed. You can't run an empire on empty stomachs. Share this with someone who thinks power is just about weapons. The administration tried to hold control. Taxes were still demanded. Grain stores were still guarded. But the more pressure they applied, the faster the system broke. Provinces stopped sending supplies to the capital. Local leaders protected their own people instead of the empire. Loyalty collapsed the moment survival was on the line. If you've ever seen unity disappear when things get hard, you know this story. Follow for more reality checks. And here's where it gets even darker. As southern regions dried out, massive waves of people migrated north, desperate for fertile land and water. Cities became overcrowded. Borders became unstable. Resources became thinner. The empire wasn't just starving. It was being flooded with refugees from its own territory. Imagine trying to manage millions of hungry people when you can't feed your own army. Like if you see how fast systems can overload. Conflict exploded. Not because people wanted war, but because hunger makes patience disappear. Villages fought villages. Cities shut their gates to outsiders. Roads became dangerous. Trade routes collapsed. What once connected the empire now became lines of tension and fear. When survival is threatened, cooperation becomes optional. Common survival mode, if you feel this. The rulers try to respond with force. Armies were sent to control unrest, to protect storehouses, to keep provinces in line. But soldiers can't fight drought. They can't command rain. They can't stab hunger away. The empire's strength was built for human enemies, not environmental collapse. And that's the trap every powerful system falls into. Follow now if this is hitting deep. Archaeologists later found layers of abandonment in cities that were once thriving. Homes left midlife. Tools dropped. Streets emptied. It's as if people walked away in a hurry, choosing uncertainty over guaranteed starvation. Imagine leaving behind your entire world, because staying means dying. Save this if that thought just hit you. The collapse wasn't a single event. It was a chain reaction. Climate stress led to food failure. Food failure led to migration. Migration led to conflict. Conflict led to political breakdown. Political breakdown led to total collapse. One weak point triggered the next. Systems don't fall from one punch. They fall from 1,000 small cracks. Like this if you see the pattern. And here's the part most history books rush past. After the fall of the Akkadians, the region didn't instantly recover. The drought period left scars that lasted generations. Cities took centuries to rebuild. Trade networks were forgotten. Knowledge was lost. Power shifted. The world that existed before the climate shift never fully returned. Collapse doesn't just destroy the present, it steals the future. Follow for more hidden truths. Think about how terrifying this must have felt. No news, no explanations, no way to know if the drought would end next year or never. People lived in permanent uncertainty. That psychological pressure alone can break societies. Fear changes behavior. Desperation changes values. Survival changes identity. Comment, this is deep if you're feeling it. And now ask yourself something uncomfortable. If a powerful ancient empire could collapse because of sudden climate change, what makes modern societies immune? Technology helps. Science helps. But stability still depends on the same thing it always has, a predictable environment. If that shifts faster than systems can adapt, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes louder. Share this if you think people underestimate this risk. Because this story isn't just about the past. It's a warning carved into the soil. It shows how quickly order can unravel when nature pulls a foundation out from under civilization. The Akkadians didn't lose to another empire. They lost to a shift in the world itself. And the scariest part is how normal everything felt. Right until it didn't. After collapse, the real test begins. Stay with me. When the Akkadian Empire finally lost its grip, the world didn't pause to mourn it. Power vacuums never stay empty for long. Follow now. Cities that once answered to a single authority were suddenly on their own. No central supply system. No coordinated defense. No shared rules. Each city had to figure out survival from scratch. Some tried to hold on to old structures, pretending the empire still existed. Others adapted fast, breaking away and creating local systems of control. Like this if you've seen people cling to broken systems. Survivors scattered across Mesopotamia, settling near any remaining water source they could find. Rivers became lifelines. Small farming communities replaced massive urban centers. The age of giant cities faded, replaced by a quieter, harsher reality. When resources shrink, scale becomes a weakness. Comment, smaller TOs survive, if that makes sense. What's wild is that collapse didn't end civilization. It reshaped it. New cultures rose from the ruins. Local kings gained power. Trade slowly returned in smaller, more cautious networks. People learned painful lessons about overdependence on centralized systems. They diversified food sources. They spread settlements. They adapted to the environment instead of forcing it to obey them. Follow if you're realizing collapse can be a reset, but the trauma lingered. Stories of drought, hunger, and abandoned cities became part of cultural memory. Parents warned children about times when the sky betrayed the land. Myths were born from real fear. When disaster becomes story, it means it changed people forever. Save this if that hits deep. New powers eventually rose, learning from the Akkadians' fall. Regions once controlled by one empire became competing city-states again. Authority was more local. Control was more fragile. No one wanted to trust a single system with everything again. Trauma teaches caution, like if you see how societies learn through pain. And here's something most people miss. Collapse didn't affect everyone equally. Elites fell hard because they depended on complex systems. Farmers who adapted, nomads who moved with the climate, and smaller communities that stayed flexible survived better. Complexity brings power, but it also brings vulnerability. Follow if you're noticing the trade-off. People changed how they built. Cities became smaller and closer to water. Storage systems became more important than expansion. Defense focused on protecting resources instead of borders. Survival rewrote priorities. When the environment sets the rules, politics takes a back seat. Comment, nature makes the rules, if you feel this. And then time did what time always does. New generations grew up who never saw the old empire. To them, the Akkadian superpower was just a story. The collapse that felt like the end of the world to one generation became ancient history to the next. That's how fast perspective changes. Share this with someone who thinks today's problems will always feel this big. But the land remembered. Soil layers stayed dry. Farming patterns shifted permanently. The region's relationship with climate was never the same. Humans adapted, but the memory of vulnerability remained in how societies organized themselves. Collapse leaves fingerprints long after ruins turn to dust. Follow for more hidden patterns in history. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Collapse didn't just remove a powerful empire. It removed the illusion of control. People realize the world isn't stable just because it has been stable for a while. Systems can feel eternal right before they break. That lesson shaped how future civilizations thought about power, food, and survival. Like this, if you're seeing history in a new way. And now bring this forward. Modern societies are complex beyond anything the Akkadians imagined. Global supply chains, massive cities, interconnected systems, incredible technology. But complexity still means dependence. And dependence still means vulnerability. The question isn't whether collapse is possible. The question is how resilient systems are when stress hits. Follow if you're thinking bigger now. Resilience doesn't mean avoiding collapse forever. It means designing systems that bend instead of shatter. Smaller networks, diverse food sources, flexible infrastructure, shared knowledge. The survivors after the Akkadian fall didn't rebuild the same world. They built a different one. And that's the real lesson. Collapse can be an ending or a transformation. Comment, adapt, or fall if that line hit you. Because the story of the Akkadians isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror. It reflects how quickly power can fade, how suddenly stability can disappear, and how survival belongs to those who adapt fastest, not those who rule hardest. When we look back at the fall of the Akkadian Empire, it's tempting to treat it like a distant tragedy, something sealed in stone and dust, safely trapped in the past. Follow right now. But collapse doesn't announce itself with fire and thunder. It begins with small changes people explain away. The rain comes late one year. The harvest shrinks a little. Food prices rise just enough to hurt, not enough to cause panic. Leaders promise fixes. People adjust. Life continues. And that's how danger sneaks in when problems feel manageable. Think about how humans respond to slow warning signs. We normalize them. We adapt emotionally before we adapt structurally. People in ancient Mesopotamia didn't wake up one day and say, "The empire is about to fall." They woke up and said, "This year is worse than last year." Like this if you've ever downplayed a problem, because it grew slowly. By the time the drought became undeniable, the system was already fragile. Food reserves were strained. Trade routes were unstable. Trust in leadership was cracked. People were exhausted from adapting over and over again. Collapse doesn't just destroy resources. It drains resilience before it destroys anything physical. Comment, burnout is real, if that feels familiar. What makes the Akkadian collapse so haunting isn't just that it happened, but how human the response was. Denial, delay, hope, blame, prayer, control. People tried everything except the one thing that might have saved them. Early structural change. Systems that wait for proof of disaster before adapting usually adapt too late. Follow if you're seeing the pattern. Here's the lesson most people miss. Climate didn't destroy the empire by itself. The empire's rigidity did. The environment changed. The system didn't change fast enough. When systems are built for efficiency instead of flexibility, they thrive in stable times and break in unstable ones. That's not just ancient history. That's a design flaw that still exists today. Save this. After the collapse, the world that replaced the Akkadian system wasn't weaker. It was different. Smaller power centers, more localized control, slower growth, less reach, but more adaptability. People learned to live within limits instead of pretending limits didn't exist. Power shrank, but survival improved. Sometimes losing scale is the price of staying alive. Like this if that reframes success for you. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many people at the top didn't survive the collapse. Elites rely on systems. When systems fail, status doesn't protect you. The people who adapted best were those closest to the land, closest to food production, closest to flexible survival strategies. The more removed you are from basic survival, the more vulnerable you become when systems break. Comment, basic skills matter. If that hits, over time, stories of the Akkadians turn into warnings. Not warnings about enemies, warnings about arrogance. About believing power can outmuscle nature. About thinking control is permanent. The ruins became silent reminders that no system is above the environment it depends on. Follow if you're realizing humility is survival. Now, pull this into the present. Modern civilization is the most complex system humans have ever built. Global supply chains, massive cities, just-in-time food delivery, interconnected energy grids, digital infrastructure. It's powerful. It's efficient. It's also tightly coupled. When one part fails, many parts feel it. Complexity multiplies both strength and fragility. Share this with someone who thinks technology makes us untouchable. Resilience isn't about predicting every disaster. It's about designing systems that can absorb shocks without collapsing. Diversity instead of monoculture. Redundancy instead of optimization. Local capacity instead of total centralization. The Akkadian world optimized for growth and control. It didn't optimize for sudden change. And sudden change is what it got. Like this if you see the warning. The deepest lesson of this story isn't civilization's fall. It's civilization's fall when they mistake stability for safety. Stability is a condition. Safety is a design choice. One can disappear overnight. The other has to be built deliberately, long before it's needed. Follow for more stories that change how you see the world. Imagine being one of the last people to remember the empire at its peak. You've seen full storehouses, crowded markets, strong borders. And now you're watching empty streets, abandoned fields, and children who will never know that world. Collapse isn't just structural. It's emotional. It's the grief of watching a future you expected disappear. Comment, that's heavy, if you felt that. And yet, humanity didn't end. People adapted. New cultures rose. Knowledge slowly rebuilt. The world didn't go dark forever. Collapse ended one version of civilization and forced the birth of another. Endings create space for new systems. The danger is assuming the next system will automatically be better. Progress isn't guaranteed. It's built. Save this if you believe adaptation is a skill, not a miracle. So when you hear the story of the Akkadians, don't hear ancient tragedy. Hear early warning system. Hear what happens when systems grow powerful but brittle. Hear what happens when environmental change moves faster than social change. This isn't fear content. This is awareness content. Awareness is how collapse becomes transformation instead of catastrophe. Like if you're still with me. Because the real power isn't in ruling empires. It's in building systems that can survive when the world stops behaving the way it used to. The Akkadian Empire ruled a stable world. It couldn't survive an unstable one. The future belongs to systems that expect instability and design for it. If this shifted how you see civilization, follow for more stories like this. Share this with someone who thinks collapse is impossible, and comment ready to adapt if you're done underestimating how fast the world can change.